I want to start today by saying I want to make a confession. My entire presentation changed last night. Completely true. See a laugh, but I mean it. In sincerity, for the last week, I have been wrecked with anxiety. I don't know why I was stressing this presentation more than I've stressed others, but something was off. And I was made aware of it when I reached out to a student reached out to me and said, "Hey, are you ready for tomorrow?" My first response was, "No, not at all," right? And she said, "Well, what do you mean?" And I said, "Why do I put myself in this position? Why did I want the stress of giving a presentation?" And she said, "To make history." She has very high goals for me, making history, right? So I replied to her, my snarky usual way, and I said, "Well, there's two ways to do that." And she said, "What do you mean?" And I said, "An epic fail or epic success." And she said, "Why not both?" I came to the conclusion through what she said, why not just fail right out of the gate, right? Just come out and admit everything's awful, it's not going to be okay, but I'm still going to stand here and do what I'm supposed to do. Because that's what we ask students to do every day, right? We ask them to go through the negative so that they can understand the positive and learn from this experience. So I would be a horrible fraud if I got up here and tried to do anything different. So I scratched everything because I realized my anxiety was coming because I was trying to make a perfect TED talk. I was wanting to give you all a TED experience. But I'm Stephen, not Ted. I missed putting myself in my presentation, and that's what I needed to do. So this is the revision of my talk. Some points are going to be the same. My heart goes out to the people who selected the presentation that I had at first. They're going to get this version, which is hopefully better. Hopefully there's success in it. I want you all to do me a favor. Remember when you were younger. Remember a time when something grabbed hold of you, like an alien abduction. You were very passionate about this. Maybe it was singing, maybe it was drawing, writing, science, art, but it was your special thing. And you started sharing it where you felt safe, right? Where it was safe to be vulnerable. But you were afraid to share it with certain people because you knew what they were going to say, right? Because the minute we see all of that beauty of that wonderful moment, that magical thing where we felt home in this idea, when we shared it with certain folks, maybe it was a parent, a teacher, a coach, religious leader, or other authority figure, they shot us down. They said, "You're never going to be successful if you do that," right? That's failure. They said, "That's not going to end in a benefits package. Why would you do it?" What they did, we can't say with all malice, right? Sometimes our parents or other leaders are controlled by their own limitations, right? Their own failures to conformity, their own insecurities. So all they're trying to do is protect us in the same way that they've been protected, which ultimately ends in never living, never experiencing something that they truly love. I always felt school was a place that you should get that. I remember wonderful moments of my education. I will say a little bit different about my education. From K through 6, I went to a private school. In 6th grade, I had 15 classmates in my entire grade. That's it. In 7th grade, I transferred to a public school. In this public school, I immediately went to classrooms of 30 students or more in a grade of about 250 to 300. I noticed something very different between me and my peers. I had connections with teachers. I sought those out. I wanted to relate to them, but they didn't. It seemed to be that there was a meeting somewhere that I wasn't a part of where students and teachers agreed to just get through the day. Not to inspire each other, not to try to get some extra moment of wonder, but just to get through the day. Now, some of that's the difference between having a class size of 15 versus a class size of 30, right? That's going to be, now when you take a little extra thing called high-stakes standardized testing, I think we're all in love with that, right? That's a great thing. But when you put that on top of a densely populated classroom, we can understand how those genuine interactions are not going to be likely. We can also understand that that student body who has this budding passion that they want to develop, it's probably unlikely when they're tethered to things that they can't control, trying to fight off a conformity to what other people think they should be. I wanted more for my students. I wanted students to have a different experience. Because the idea that Gale Schultz sells about school, where it's fallen into a uniformity that leaves no room for the angular thinker, a person whose performance is jagged with strong aptitudes in some areas, disinterest or outright deficiency in others. This is too much of a reality for us today in education. And Nassim Nicholas Taleb says, few realize that we are changing the brains of children through medication in order to adjust them to the curriculum rather than the reverse. It seems to be that we have a vested interest in selling something that almost seems like a conveyor belt of education, pushing people through to get a certain test score or certain things, and we create a pedagogy of that. And we start fighting with this pedagogy, right? As Parker Palmer says, if we stop lobbing pedagogical points at each other and spoke about who we are as teachers, a remarkable thing may happen. We might develop integrity with our student bodies. These are the points that drove me to changing my room. I wanted to create a pedagogy of love. I wanted to take all of these different pedagogical efforts and turn them into something that might benefit people, right? But first I had to connect. I had to grow a relationship with my students. So I did what teachers do. I created an assignment. It's what we do, right? We figure we can fix the entire world one assignment at a time, and we do that, right? So the assignment was pretty simple. I was going to include reflective writing assignments each week with my students. Some of the questions I were going to ask are a little open-ended, but it's psychology, so anything relates, right? Anything I can come up with means something because people did it. One question I asked, consider death as a metaphor for moving past something no longer useful, maybe outgrown or outworn. What is the best death you've experienced? Well, I already had a death today, right? I did that right here on a red circle. I just came out, killed myself, rebuilt what I could maybe be. It's fun. When we think about answering these questions, think about the numbers of times you've reinvented yourself. Think about the accomplishment that is. Why wouldn't we give students that same opportunity? The things that I've read in this, and these assignments are honestly horrific sometimes. But I give them the freedom to do that, to put that here. If you were the opposite of who you are, how different would you be? Explain. I had a professor in grad school who said, the best way to know who you are is to identify who you're not. Identify a pain that helped you heal somehow and a pleasure that hurt you. We like to write a highlight reel of ourselves, don't we? We've never suffered. We've never had any problems. It's a very narrow view of our story because our story is jaded with negative things. And that's a testament to who we are, that we've overcome all of those things. It's important that we appreciate this binary that's in us, because it makes us, right? So as I'm doing these assignments, and I can tell you firsthand, some things I've read are horrible. I've read everything from just, the student who wants to try to write a 2-sentence paper instead of a 1-page paper. They're great. I love them too. To existential crisis, to really horrific trauma. I started grading them for completion, right? Did they cover things? But then I realized that my reflection back to them was probably more important than a grade that they could make. So I opened myself to reflect to them honestly. For those that identified a severe trauma, I tried to get them to seek help, show them what services are available to them. It gave me a great way to connect with my students. About spring semester 2018, a student came to me and she told me that through these assignments, she had started trying to deal with something that she had been avoiding for a very long time. A pretty horrible trauma in her high school career. Through talking with her, I realized that I think these might have more power than I think. I think there could be more to them than that. So, fall 2018, I entered my school, or my courses, with a research study and 2 helpers, right? 2 research assistants. We began with a pre-post test packet looking for inventories of autonomy, self-awareness, and self-compassion. So they took the same inventories the first day of class and the last day of class. We found significant results in each one of those areas for these students. But it's a quasi-experiment that spans for an entire semester, so there's a lot of reasons that might be. So at the very end, we had them answer a few Likert-Scale type questions to identify maybe what could be at play. What we found, on a scale of 1 to 10, where 1 is not at all and 10 is a whole lot, identify how much you agree that the reflective writing helped you learn more about yourself. You can see there 48% of people said 8 to 10, 32, 5 to 7, and leaving 20% to 1 and 4. So they're definitely saying that this created an awareness, but that could just be like, let's make professor happy time, right? And so we don't know if we can really rely on that. So the next question I wanted to ask was really important. On a scale of 1 to 10, how much would you agree that you would have grown as much without the reflective quizzes? 9% said between 8 and 10. 43 between 5 and 7, 48 between 1 and 4. And if I move it to 1 and 5, 74% of people said that those quizzes helped them grow, that they needed them for that effort. The last question I asked is how likely would you be to take this forward, right? 60% said 8 to 10. 26, 5 to 7, with 14 coming between 1 and 4. Here I'm seeing growth. I'm seeing the students develop who they are, what they are, because at the end of the day, it seems to be that students want to know that it'll be okay. They also want to know that if it isn't okay, they have someone they can depend on, who might help them make it okay. So creating a pedagogy of love means, for me, listening to our students, opening yourself up to their life, sharing with them, and letting them teach you things. Before I conclude, there are people I want to thank. My 2 research assistants, Kaylin Peterson and Morgan Dunsmore. Also my family here, Laura Jackson and Audrey, sitting right there. Without them, I don't know what I could do. I also want to acknowledge that I come from a list of teachers who have spent time with me, who've taught me and hugged me and nurtured me. Because I sought that out. All of them were willing. Very few made a first move. The sister Stella obviously were in grade school, so that was, 15 kids. It was easy for them to do that. If we're creating a pedagogy of love, we might want to understand that the end goal of love would be to create freedom. freedom for them to exist as they are. Taleb said, "You exist if and only if you are free to do things without a visible objective, with no justification, and above all, outside of the dictatorship of someone else's narrative." How many of us live the narrative that our parents put on us, a coach, a teacher, instead of being who we are? It's important to understand what freedom can give. I want to leave you with a story that's near and dear to my heart. About 12 years ago, I met a Romanian scientist. And he shared with me a story that really impacted him, and it still impacts me as I've heard it. When he was about 10, he grew up dirt road, no electricity kind of Romanian scientist, right? When he was around 10, his dad asked him, "What do you want to do with life? What do you want to be?" It's a big question for a 10-year-old to answer. He looked at his dad straight in the face and he said, "I want to be happy." Great answer. Then the kid got a little nervous and he said, "But Dad, how can I be happy?" And he said, "Well, that's easy. If you want to be happy for a day, take a nap. If you want to be happy for a couple of weeks, win a prize. If you want to be happy for a few years, get married." Obviously, Dad doesn't have high thoughts of marriage. He said, "But if you want to be happy the rest of your life, find something you love, something you care so much about, and find a way to make a living doing it." Isn't that the goal of education? To create a passion in the student body? To love what they'll be, what they'll become? You might be saying right now, so John Lennon was right. All we need is love. I'd say that he wasn't. We need so much more than love. But I would say that maybe the most important thing we need is love. Thank you.